Okay. You're recording. Ready.
Do we need to wait for Emmanuel?
Oh,
No, he's gonna be
Very
late.
good.
He's gonna be late anyway. We can start. Everybody's ready.
Motion.
Yeah. Motion to start?
No, you don't need a
No,
motion to
okay.
start. She just
No.
officially opens the meeting at.
No. Oh, not bad.
So you have to say. the meeting-
7:05, we'll begin the meeting. Then we're being taped. Oh, thank you. Oh, yeah, that big agenda.
Oh, here, I have it printed too. if you want.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. You didn't hear about my refrigerator.
No.
Oh, well. Approval of September meetings, I think we're all there, were we? At the
At the annual
yeah,
meeting, that
at
was
the
the annual meeting.
Yeah. Do they have a new person? We'll get into the new person later.
Maybe we'll wait to Adam.
I can introduce myself now. Let's do intros now. before we-
Yeah, let's try before we run into the agenda, so yeah. Adam, do you want
Sure.
to?
So I'm Adam Schulman. I'm a Malden resident. I'm a realtor with Leading Edge Real Estate in Melrose, and I'm happy to be here.
And you're interested in potentially joining our board, right?
I'm interested in joining the board. This is my first time here.
Yeah.
And to observe and listen and learn, and excited to do so.
Awesome.
Well,
Thank you.
And have you met everybody on the board? Should we go around with some introductions?
I've met most people, I think,
Okay.
but not all. But I can either
Why don't we
meet
go
or
to
know
Rob
after.
and Rob, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Rob Demarco. I am a lawyer here in Malden and have been representing UMA before that MATV for several years, and was invited here to talk about a few questions and give you guys updates. So glad to be here. I don't know everybody, so a
Yeah, I think
round
we'll
would
go
be
round
great.
robin. I'll start and then we'll jump into board members. How's that? In case you don't know me, my name's Tina. I'm the executive director of OMA. Yeah, and I've been here 2.5, almost 3 years already. Okay. Do you want to go?
okay, Karen Lynch, I'm the vice president of the chair. And a Malden resident,
And you've been on the board forever.
yeah, I have about 10 years.
I'm Lori Ardai. I'm the secretary. I live in Malden. I've been on this board for quite a few years.
I'm Eden Garhart Smith. I believe I've been in Malden for 20, but I've been on the board for a year, I believe, so I'm
Yeah.
just a board member on that. I don't know. I don't.
Never just a board.
Just a board member.
Board
Please,
member.
you need to work.
Brian Boswell, a financial planner here in Malden. I'm currently serving as treasurer in my second of 3 years of my term. And yeah. See how it goes.
Hopefully
We'll see
we'll
how
be
it goes
back
from
for
there.
another-
Jonathan Beckmeyer, Malden resident for about 20 years, and I just got on the board at the beginning of this year, so.
Yeah, both, Jonathan, you were on the board before,
I started at the annual meeting and I think Jonathan started.
Jonathan
shortly
and
after
Lizette, too.
And
Lizette,
Lizette, yeah.
yeah, so we have 3 newer board members.
Excellent.
Um,
Lizette's not here tonight?
I'm just texting her right now just to see if she's running late.
And do you know Emmanuel?
Yes, Manuel and I were catching up. We're both old Edgeworth kids.
And
Okay.
we do, yes, we do have Emmanuel Marsh, our current chair elect, what is it, interim chair, because it's on the agenda tonight to actually appoint.
I'm old Malden as well. I'm Malden born, Malden Hospital born, raised
Oh,
Edgeworth,
Wow, Malden Hospital.
Malden Hospital. Actually, the obstetrician was Dr. Stella, Frank Stella's father. Frank Stella, my grandfather, short story, my grandfather used to sweep the floors as extra money. He was a Malden police officer. Butch Genetti's brother-in-law.
Oh, for goodness
And
sakes.
my grandfather, John Pullier, swept the floors for Dr. Stella. And he used to say, my son is doing all these things, these art pieces. Why don't you take a couple home so I can tell him I sold a few? My grandfather would be like, not our taste.
No kidding.
unfortunately.
I'm assuming this is somebody that's well known in the art world now.
Yeah, Frank Stella is one of the sons of Malden. His art is on the street around here.
I should know these
He's
things,
the,
should I not?
He's an abstract artist.
Say when I get out from behind my desk, I'll.
He
Frank
is,
Stella is a well-known modern contemporary artist.
Right.
Yeah,
So there's artwork behind Malden High, and then there's the
Yeah.
walkability signs that.
Yeah, I've seen the work, yeah.
And that's his.
Oh, wonderful.
But it's
Beautiful.
not just in Malden, he's.
he's world,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
No, one of his pieces is
He's
several
never
million
collected.
dollars.
Yeah, he's like
And
solid.
it could have been in my house,
That's a great.
or at least my,
Or on the auction block.
on the auction block, and I wouldn't be here
Right.
today, working at 7 o'clock at night.
Right? Well, speaking of working, we do have them
So,
on the clock,
all right.
so.
Motion to approve the minutes?
Second,
Next,
all in favor.
oh, is anybody, against it?
Anybody opposed?
You know that we
We're
would.
all
Yeah.
in favor. If somebody needed to review them or anything, they could oppose, right?
Yeah.
It's the any meeting.
Are you gonna oppose?
No, I motion, it's a little weird.
Any abstaining?
You have video to watch too.
Any abstaining? It's passed.
All, well, you still have to call for the vote, all in favor.
All in favor, say aye.
Great. Now,
Now, Rob Demarco is gonna talk about law discussion.
Legal.
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 I'm gonna talk about the contract a little bit.
Okay,
Let's
So,
start with that.
yeah, the first topic is the contract with the city of Malden, the telecommunications contract, which has dragged on at this point for better than 10 years. Malden and Malden never really had,
We are recording. it.
Okay.
Public comment.
it never really had a contract in place. There was a lot of efforts to get it back and forth. Tina has successfully pushed to get it done. The city and Malden have reached an agreement in principle. It has been executed. Currently, it is sitting with the city to give back to us. I believe that a delay in getting us their signatures is due to an ongoing busy schedule in the city hall. They've had trials, et cetera, this week, and city solicitor just needs to officially put it off her desk. So that's the kind of thing that just happens. But we're done with it, and it's a great success because you guys now are officially under contract, which is something that's been an objective for a long time. So it's
And in layman's
congratulations.
terms, just to kind of talk about what this means for our organization in the city. It's a rarity to have an agreement with a municipality as a community media arts center across the nation. I'm well versed in this, and people are looking at us going, how are you getting this done? And in my mind, this really shows our organization, the commitment the city has to our organization, and the belief and the trust that they have in our organization to provide these services to the community. So I'm really excited about the fact that it's getting executed finally. When I stepped into this role and I found out it was in the works, I was like, why are we not getting this done now, right? So it's been a lot of work on everybody's part to really get to the table and get this signed, and it's a huge boon for, I think, both parties, you know, our commitment to providing excellent customer service and services to our community, as well as the city's belief in our ability to do so, is in writing now.
Yeah, no, you guys are, UMA is the designated recipient of the telecommunications funds. The city has committed to that. You've committed to providing those resources to the citizens. You've committed to growth together. That's long-term security for the organization, which a lot of organizations, as Tina said, my experience, it's few and far between. There are, Massachusetts is pretty good at doing this, but a lot of places across the country don't have that type of commitment. And so, you've got security. So congratulations.
Thank you.
So essentially, that means the checks from Comcast and Verizon go right into our account.
Yes, it's getting
So, no mid-
95% of the funding is guaranteed in the
Yeah.
contract. And it's right there in writing, so, yeah.
The city it does pass through the city, but there's
Yeah.
controls in place. So it's not gonna be the stagnation and,
Right.
the waiting. You guys are gonna be able to have a nice firm. And from the position of outsiders, I think that in my experience, opens a lot of potential for security with donors, funders,
Right.
people looking at you and saying, this is an organization that can really grow and we can commit to. Grants, et cetera. They're all much more of an option now.
Absolutely. I did send a copy of the unsigned contract to everybody to look through. There are a lot of checks and balances within the contract, which I actually appreciate for the transparency purposes. So there will be a lot of reporting coming out of my office to the city to show them, how we're spending those funds, what we're doing as an organization to expand our resources and not depend on the city's funding so much, or cable funding. But it also allows us to ask for documentation from the cable companies to verify the funds that are coming in. It does allow for us to ask for a more expedited service in the funds allocation, that kind of thing, so. And it's a 3-year term, I believe,
Yes.
so. It's an
And
initial
it's
contract.
it will self-renew unless the parties need to make changes and edits and things like that. It sets you guys in a good course. It renews with the renewal of those contracts from Verizon and Comcast. It also allows for expansion into HD arenas. This is really about a commitment, not only to Tina, but also to the way the organization is being structured. These type of contracts give a roadmap so that in the event leadership changes, the organization doesn't suffer from a halt or a stagnation or a hiccup in the way things are done. It's the best way for nonprofits to continue their growth is to have these sources of funding become secured. It also gives you guys the option to look to other ways of financing. So when you have secure areas of money coming in that pays for the work and the costs of doing things, getting financing for specialized projects, you have a couple that are on the table right now that you're looking at, right? Those become a much easier route because you've got security and you've got something to show, financiers. Look, we're able to cover the electricity, we're able to cover the employment, we're able to cover these things and not face issues with a month to month. And you guys also own your own property. So when you start adding those pieces together, there's a lot of security and a lot of my experience with nonprofits. I've worked with a lot of them. I've worked with a lot of the nonprofits in the city and other places in the state. That's unusual. You have ownership and you have secured areas of funding that are not minuscule. This is a major piece of funding for you. So good.
I have a question. I know often with the Verizon and Comcast agreements, the city does reach out to the community asking how like those services have benefited the public as a whole. Is that gonna be on the responsibility of UMA now, or is that gonna still lie with the city?
So to clarify, the city will always take on the responsibility of the cable franchise negotiations. UMA is a partner in coordinating the focus groups that we get during the needs assessment process of a feasibility study. It's a requirement every time you do a franchise renewal.
Right.
And so we are required to have the funding to do that, and we hire an outside source to do it. It's very common across the nation. I've been through many of these. But the city itself is responsible for the negotiations and finalizing the contract.
Thank you.
Welcome, board interim president.
Hello, actually, I'll sit over this one.
Yeah,
Proud enough.
Rob was just talking about our almost executed contract.
So what Tina's saying is absolutely correct. So you'll still, the city does take leadership. The city provides the checks and balances. They have the ability to redirect in the future if there's a breach by UMA of those prerogatives, because you guys have to supply the citizens. The monies are for the citizens. So you have to supply those services. So the city is going to keep an eye on that, rightfully so. They're going to keep an eye on the assets you purchase. But they're entrusting UMA, and signing off on this agreement means that you're not gonna end up with a nonprofit opening down the street and saying, hey, city, split it with us, because we'll do just as good a job. The city does have to look at them at the renewal time and kind of gauge them, but you guys have a track record, and when you see those type of issues crop up, you know where your weaknesses are and adjust accordingly so that you continue to be the person who's gonna get this done.
Well, this also says to us from the city itself, look, we're not gonna take this funding and try to do it all ourselves, because they could.
Yeah.
They have every right to do that, because they are the signers to these franchise negotiations. But they have designated us as their designated PEG organization to provide the services, and so. Again, that's that commitment to our organization.
What's a PEG organization?
Public educational and government channels.
I saw that, I did read the contract actually beforehand, so I was curious.
Yeah.
But I see PEG, I was like, I guess
Anyway.
PEG.
Yeah, though the idea here is dissemination of information for, for the education, the government, et cetera. And you've also been put in a place where, like Tina said, a lot of the cities around here do not have, you don't have a Malden, a Medford Access TV, right? Some of these other,
There is actually.
there, but yeah.
But it's
they're-
like 3 people.
Exactly. So a lot of these cities are doing it themselves, which was pointed out to us a few
Everett would
times.
be a great
Everett,
example.
yeah.
Everett has one person housed at City Hall to do all of their paid programming. They don't have I don't think. They don't think they have public access. Which is what we offer, right?
Does the contract,
Which is what you're familiar with.
does the
yeah.
contract put any obligations on us that we don't already have? Did it change any of the nature of any of the services that was provided?
No, it does ask you to update
There was one
things
thing.
like your language.
Um,
Not major changes.
It
There-
did ask for updated bylaws, which we'll
Yeah.
get into, and then it did ask for a language access plan. Which we've
that makes sense.
already
Yeah.
drafted and had an outside consultant. Review, and now are turning into an actual step-by-step strategic plan, so that will be provided to the city.
Yeah, but what I mean is you're not doing a dramatic change of who you guys are.
No, not in any sense.
Yeah,
no.
no.
In
So-
fact, it kind of opens up, some of the language opens up us the ability to do other things related to media arts. With outside funding
Yeah.
sources.
But they do want you to fix things like the bylaws. Your bylaws are pretty antiquated. You do have, and I don't know if you want me to segue into some of that
Sure.
discussion of bylaws.
Unless anyone else has more questions on the contract
Just one
first.
more question. So, the city's gonna give us money. Now, is what they're giving us only from the, Comcast and Verizon?
Yes.
Okay, it's not from their pocket.
No, it's just to clarify so that we're very clear, the funds are coming from Comcast and Verizon through the city.
Okay.
And then get passed directly to UMA. So, the capital funds do stay housed at the city. And then part of the contract is to, submit requests to spend capital expense funds, so. And an example will be the HVAC, which we'll vote on. Really, it was just an email to Ron Hogan saying, hey, are you behind me spending this money and getting reimbursed right away? Or do I need to figure out something else? And he was like, yep, no problem. So it could come in a formal request, and I do believe we have, it is laid out clearly in the contract. We have so many months to accommodate certain things. I think the board seat, we had 12 months from the signing of the contract to allow the mayor to have a city representative on our board, that kind of thing. So,
That was the only other question I had, because I thought the contract was great, by the way.
right.
But they did say that, I wasn't clear whether they're required to or optionally can appoint
They-
someone to sit.
Option, it's an option. He
It's an option.
reserves the right to have that option, and it
Okay.
must be a mayor appointed seat. So,
Yeah, and that's so that there's the ability for the city to get involved in these
I would
discussions.
love it if they had somebody come here. I was hoping it was mandatory, but it sounds like it's optional for them.
they reserve the option to have a board seat on our.
You could always invite the mayor to opine as to the people that you're looking at and to give you, this will be my designee, and things like that. But remember, a fiduciary to the board, whether appointed by the mayor or not, is a fiduciary to the board.
Mhm.
So just because the mayor might appoint somebody doesn't mean that the duty of that person is to the mayor. That's not what happens. The mayor can turn around and say, as part of your search, I've got these 5 people that I'd like you to consider. And, you know, or can say, I'd like this person to be the designee, right? Now you put that person on the board. When they become a board member, they have a fiduciary duty to the organization, not to the mayor. Now, the organization has a contractual obligation to the city that the mayor leads. So there is that connection, but the mayor is not telling you this person now listens to me and not to
Yeah.
the chair or to the ED. So that's a very important distinction.
And I,
Can I answer the question?
I just, can I follow
Go
up
ahead.
on that?
Yeah,
quick?
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I just want to say too, that, you know, in negotiations, the conversation was really about, well, we don't know what your board is agreed, talking about and doing, right? So, which is why now we record all of our board meetings and we put them online right away so that we're very transparent. We're having a conversation about what we're doing here in the organization. And I thought it was a great point that came out of the contract negotiations, like, why are we not being transparent, right? So, yeah, I think that's part of, you know, just understanding
Yeah,
what we're
no.
doing. right?
These monies are meant for the public, and having the public be able to observe how you guys are spending the monies in that piece of it is absolutely important. And I think it's great. Nonprofits that are transparent to the outside world, when run efficiently, you know, when they stop being run efficiently, then there can be no way to hide. And that's a good thing. People need to know how the money is being spent and what's happening, and I think it just expands your reputation.
Question from, and I'm gonna ask a stupid one, but I think one that probably needs some clarification, or in my mind. I know a breach is a breach, right? That's one thing I've always learned, but if we do breach somehow, you know, unintentional, right? It doesn't matter if it's intentional or not, but if we do breach, do we have a time period to cure that breach, right? Will
It's
they give
written
us-
in the
it is
contract,
written,
yeah.
okay. I just wanted to make sure that that's.
Yeah, do you have it with you?
That's what I'm looking
I think
for.
it's- Yeah, it is a very reasonable, process to, yeah, they give you,
There's a notice, it's the typical default, you know, you have
Yeah.
so many days, I'm not popping up. It's
And I
not
don't have it in
actually
front
the
of me.
most important piece, mainly because they're not. It's not become, so you have an obligation to indemnify the city for what you do. They don't want to be responsible for your actions.
I was.
I will find it.
Not to put
I
it
can
on the spot,
probably-
Yeah, there is
Yeah.
writing in there and it's standard,
gotta-
and I think it's like
yeah.
45 days or something
Yeah.
like that,
It's
yeah.
calendar days.
Yeah, I think it's business days.
Before we move on to the bylaws, I just want to say thank you to both of you for working towards this, because I know it's been a long time in the making. So thank you for all the hard work
Thank
getting this done.
2.5.
Yeah.
Well, 2.5 of my time,
Yeah,
but as Rob
right.
mentioned, this has been something that's been in the works for a decade almost.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. Ron tried to kickstart it. Different administrations came, I mean,
Ron
Gary, Ron Hogan and Ron Cox. But different administrations came through. Gary Christensen has been extremely committed to the organization. And Ron Hogan has been great to work with. And not just because, you know, it's being recorded.
No, of
but-
course, no, no.
You don't have to
No,
say those
I
things.
absolutely
right?
echo those
You
sentiments.
know, but it's great to have, you weren't here, Emmanuel,
Yeah.
prior. It's great to have the city's commitment to you
Yeah.
guys.
correct.
That's really what it's about.
Yes.
And it's a commitment back to do the right thing. So it's a good partnership here.
Agreed.
I think you kind of just answered the question I was gonna ask, but I'm curious as to what the tipping point was. And this, what really made this happen? Was there a key moment or decision or?
When I came on as executive director, I went, wait, there's a third party agreement in the mix here. What's going on? And I immediately jumped on it. And I started in April. In May, we started contract committee teams. There was a lot of back and forth in the original draft of the contract. We were looking at maybe having something that was a little less constrictive in reporting and that kind of thing, and realized that in order to build a relationship and a partnership, we needed to accommodate those checks and balances. So that's some of that took a while to sort of iron out.
Got it. Thanks.
So the city has the right to terminate based upon malfeasance, breach, etc. And you may avoid the termination by curing any breach within the 120 days. So you have quite a bit of time.
Yeah.
So we have time then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was looking at a draft.
What are you putting out in the?
I have a draft and I have the final in my.
This is my old job coming back to me. and
What
I-
are you doing over here?
This is my old, because when we were doing ours, of course, like, we had a grievance process and
Yeah,
anytime that the contract was breached, we would follow a step up to a certain point till.
The only time the city can speed that up is when there's a danger to the, obviously, if there's a danger that's immediate, the city can step in. Which is very, very typical.
Yeah.
Or if there's no way to really cure it,
Correct.
so the city can step in those instances. But there's a lot of trust having a big window because they want it to be fixed.
Yeah.
They don't want to end it.
And that's, and sorry, cause I was kind of looking through, it's 120, I hate to, I know there's a big difference, business days or calendar?
Just
days?
1 day calendar.
Just 1 day calendar, okay. Wow, I was gonna say it was 120.
One,
business
yeah,
days.
no,
That's
120, so
much
you're
around
talking
the
about, yeah,
contract.
you're talking about 4 months.
Yeah, that's what I was like, well, that's why I was like, man, I was like, if it's business
Yeah,
days,
yeah.
we got a lot of time then.
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
all right, so if there's no other questions on the contract, one of the biggest reasons I asked Rob to join us tonight is we do know that our bylaws need attention. We've talked about it for about 15 months as a board, with past board members and now current ones. And I feel I would strongly advise the board to really take some time to focus on this. And I wanted Rob here because we were having a great conversation after the contract signing, which felt a little anticlimactic because I just went like this and went, okay. And you have some really great points, so I was hoping maybe you could bring those points to light here to the board to understand, and I'm gonna take a minute to use the restroom.
Sure. So your bylaws give a lot of power to this board. That's not the way nonprofits really function well. Your job is to be strategic, not involved in the day-to-day or in things that are too specific to actual work being done here. Your job is to help guide the ED in strategic long-term decisions and to hire an ED, right? You've hired one, your job is to now place all your trust in the ED to do things. And sometimes when boards have too much control, nonprofit boards have too much control, that can cause institutions that would otherwise be supportive of being less supportive. For instance, grants. We'll look at things and say, okay, your board run, you don't have a clear vision because you're divided up among a dozen people, right? You guys have the right to have, I forget how many board members, 11 or something like that. And 11 different opinions of what the future should be is not a way an organization grows. Your job is to go out, find the person who best relates to the collective vision, and to then say, okay, find a way for that to be implemented, come up with the plan. We've got the strategic view, you implement that, and then hands off. You meet on a monthly basis, you get your reports on finance, you get your fundraising, employment issues, things that are just reports to you. So you're aware of how things are going. You're keeping due diligence on what's happening. And then those reports, in my view, and this is more of a personal preference as an attorney of these organizations, one that I find very useful. Those reports should happen in the first small fraction of the meeting. You should get them ahead of time. You review them ahead of time. The question that comes up from the chair is, does anybody have any issues that they'd like to discuss specific to the finance report? Who's the finance subcommittee chair? Oh, it's John, right, John?
Mhm.
Okay, so I apologize for name.
I'm not, but yes.
Brian, okay, so Brian, you've put a report on it. Do you need any action by the board of trustees? No. Do you need us to know something specific about the finance report? Yes, we're gonna be doing our annual audit, and I'll need to make sure that we have a vote to accept the audit by, next meeting. Okay, we're gonna put that. Now, does anybody have any questions for Brian, directed at the finance report? No? Okay. Motion to receive the finance report, seconded, all in favor, aye, and you move on. That's how these things happen, right? You hit the important things, because most of your time as a board, a good board, is spent on the strategy of the future, the strategic plan of who you will become. Are you going to segue out of being just a cable station? Are you going to enter into the social media realm? Are you going to enter into live performance realm? Are you going to look at different spaces? Are you going to do this reconstruction? And you set up yourselves for having those discussions and using the talents that are existing on the board, right? Real estate, right? Financial planning, right? Did I get that right?
No.
Financial planning, real estate.
No worry.
All right, but financial planning, your talents need to be used for that strategic idea, right? And so as you're going through and looking for new board members, that strategic view of how you are creating this organization instructs you on who to find next, right? Oh, wow, you know what we're missing? We're missing a guy who's good at facilities. I know so-and-so. Now, I have an involvement in full disclosure with Malden Catholic. I'm on the board of trustees and I'm involved with the new building that's being built, right? Malden Catholic's in the middle of a building a new building. Their facilities guy is really, really talented. Maybe he'd like to become a board member. Maybe he's interested. Does anybody know him, right? Something like that happens, and you reach out and you bring in the person that's going to fill that spot. Why? Because you're involved in the potential for a capital improvement, and you want somebody on staff who's going to be able to interface with your contractor to have the information and translate it for the rest of you, right? Because the realtor, finance guy, aren't necessarily, I forget other people who work, so I'm sorry to not pick on you, but that the other people don't necessarily have the expertise there. They don't know about the new energy code that's going to cause you more costs. They don't know about whether or not you should have improved Wi-Fi systems, etc., right? So when you're going down that road, you're spending most of your board time with a view towards that long-term planning. You're leaving Tina or Tina's successor, right? We hope you're with us for the next 20 years, but Tina's successor to run things and to implement that vision through her ideas. And you're trusting her to keep the place running and operating and implementing the strategic plan and coming to you to say, hey, my vision for how this organization should run that you hired me to implement, that merges through your strategic plan. We're not hitting it because we need talent from, you need a lawyer on the board, right? You need this on the board. Those are the talents that we need to bring out so that that person can add to the conversation. And the collective thought then forms a stronger organization. So your bylaws should reflect this idea of we're voting, we're hearing these reports, Tina, get to work. And then hands off. Because the more you involve yourself in her stuff, the less time, because you all have jobs. This is her job. The more you involve, less time you have for the long-term view. And so I like to counsel my clients that you go through those committee reports real fast, minutes, committee reports, the first 30% of the meeting. And then the next 70% of the meeting is what's the next thing on our to-do list? What's the next piece of our strategic plan? You need a strategic plan. It's one of the things that needs to be put in place so that you can have a framework and not something that sits on the shelf, something that gets put on the table and you guys, okay, we're hitting page 5 this week, guys. Let's talk. And so that kind of board formation controlled by the bylaws will give you guys a lot more in my view, strength. So that's my little pitch on bylaws. We revise them, or you revise them. Be happy to help you. I've got some great models of these. We revise them in a way that directs the board to act as a overseer and gives Tina the power to just get the work done. People have questions on that kind of idea.
Because
It
right-
may be against your view. You may be like, no, I'm on this board because I want to control this place. That's a view. That is a view, and that's not, you know, everybody's cup of tea, and you may have a difference of opinion. I like that my partner hates when I say this. Law is not rocket science. And the reason I say that is because, not because it doesn't take smart people. It's because you're not doing mathematics. You're not coming up with A plus B equals C. You're coming up with A, maybe it turns to B, maybe it subtracts from C, and maybe we throw it out and start with D, right? It's art mixed with intuition, mixed with application of rules and things. So this is the way I've formulated my view of nonprofits.
But what you're saying is that these old bylaws aren't in that framework.
Well, let's, like.
There
even
are
example-
things that can be kept.
Yeah.
There's just revisions that need it.
I mean, at one point I was reading through these and it says that the board actually writes job descriptions. Right?
See anything wrong with that?
Is this the actual bylaws as they stand today?
Yeah.
There's like multiple typos in it right off the bat.
Yeah,
Yes.
I know. I
Yes.
get it.
Yeah, so to Tina's point, your job is to write a job description for Tina. Your job is to get Tina's executive contract done. Tina's job is to then take and do all the job descriptions of her executive group. Her executive group does the job descriptions of their subordinates. They get approved by Tina, and Tina brings to your view if she wants advice or feedback, because you happen to have maybe an employment lawyer, maybe a person who does human resources on your board, right? To fill her in and help her to formulate that and hit the rules. And then she goes out and she decides on the amount of money with some input from finance, the amount of people that she needs. She does all of those things so that she can control and create the hierarchical structure. So it's a funnel. But your ideas funnel down through Tina, and Tina takes it and puts it out into the world and runs it the way she needs.
Yeah.
So,
Question.
Yeah.
How often would you update the bylaws, right? Do you do it every 6 months? Would you do it every year?
no, yeah, I typically revisit these things every 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
So same time that you're doing the strategic plan.
Yeah, strategy, yeah, you should
But we
always,
do it in conjunction, right?
yeah, I think you should always look at your governing documents every
Right.
3 years, maybe 2.5 to 3, maybe 2.5 to prep, maybe, depending on how, you know.
I have a nonprofit that I work with that revises their stuff every time they bring in a new chair.
Mm.
They want a chair to be 3 years, and the chair is given the option of taking a look and working with the ED.
Mhm.
In their situation, it's a president and a chair, right? So they work, their chair works with the president to review the bylaws and to determine whether or not that creates the best contract between the ED and the board.
Yeah, I like that.
So it's a good way of, and oftentimes they do nothing except correct typos. But
No, I like that, yeah.
Just hearing back from those that she will book herself. Yeah, so I mean, I'll leave it up to the, but this is a board task, like this is not, I have lots of notes, and be happy to provide those notes. I think I actually emailed them out to the board. I had commented on the bylaws. But at the end of the day, it is up to the board to revise, to make the decision and revise, and we do have funding for legal assistance if we need it. If you want to pull in somebody from Rob's office to help with it. Yeah. But I very much feel like that my hands are tied at times because I can't do anything without board approval, right? An example would be I had searched high and low for where it said that I had to get board approval for over a $5,000 expenditure at UMA, and I couldn't find it anywhere. It wasn't in the bylaws, it wasn't in our documentation, and here it was in my contract, right? So what supersedes what? Do the
Yeah.
bylaws supersede my contract, or why is it in my contract and not in the bylaws, right? So I think it's a lot of cleanup and understanding what roles are and what authority I have, and yeah, so.
Yeah, oh, I'm just.
Do we need the contract as well to kind of compare, like,
I don't think it would hurt, I can get. that to
right,
you,
like
yeah.
having
You
that
should have a copy of
information?
my contract
As-
anyway.
As somebody that wants to advocate for more like childhood education, like I don't know that. Like, would that be more in your contract or would that be more in like the board?
That would be in a strategic
And
planning and
Which
development.
is supposed to come from the board and not, like,
Well, to be clear, I like what Rob said, you hired me because I had a vision for the organization.
right,
And what we need to do is work together as a team to fine tune that vision and move it forward.
Okay.
So I will never advocate for having a group of 12 people telling me what to do in 12 different ways. I really think it's important that we collaborate on the strategic plan, but at the end of the day, yes, it is this group's responsibility to define the strategy and the future movement.
okay.
So when you, that's a great point to bring up, right? So this group sits here and says. You want to create a new strategic plan because now that you have this contract, right? You've said, okay, we need a real direction for what we're doing. In my view, you turn to Tina and you say, Tina, we'd like from you to give us the top 10 items that you feel need to be addressed, right? Then that goes out to you guys and chair turns around and says, okay, we've got the 3 areas of concentration. We've got the facilities concentration, we've got the finance concentration, and we've got the future programming concentration, right?
It's a
Nice-
great breakdown right
Nice
there.
breakdown,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I'm assigning the finance subcommittee to our finance person. I'm programming to the, and facilities to the person that is not in existence yet because you need a facilities. Maybe it's real estate, right? And then you guys are gonna come back with addressing how those 10 points in each one of your areas are addressed. Right? And how we're gonna create a plan that goes forward. The challenge, potential resolutions, that's how a strategic plan is designed. And your collaboration together comes out with something. And so you've got the board involvement. Then you've got the public involvement, because you got to go to your stakeholders. You've got the government involvement, another stakeholder, and maybe you've got your funders, which might be the same as your government, right, in this particular situation. But you go to those different stakeholder groups and you say, okay, this is our new strategic plan. A focus happens, people are invited in, surveys put out, that sort of thing, all towards creating the idea of what those different areas and how you break them down. But Tina comes out with the first line, you guys add the areas from your expertise, and together that plan starts to grow. That's the collaboration as I see it, but that's how I've structured them.
Okay.
Can I'm sorry, I'm so full of questions, actually.
That's
Laura,
good.
go ahead, no, Laura,
I-
go ahead,
I-
because I'm worried about
I
the.
just want to like confirm, like volunteering is not considered like interfering with day-to-day operations, right?
When you no,
As a board member.
No, board members should be, I mean, I'm a board
Yeah.
member, right, on 3 different boards. I work those 3 different organizations on a regular basis. As a lawyer, they get me involved in drafting their contracts and I disclose it, right? You have a disclosure every year, disclosing when you're involved, whether it's volunteer or whether I'm paid in certain circumstances. And in other times, I'm the one running a particular program for them. But I'm not the one, when I step into that shoe, I am then under the hierarchy of the ED, who's gonna tell me everything that needs to happen. So I have to take off that board member hat and put on the volunteer hat. And not try to cross streams.
That's an
Really
important point,
important.
yes.
Huh?
It is.
Say
It
sometimes
is.
easier said than
Oh,
done.
yeah. The number
is
of times
true.
I'm at an event and I'm labeling out soup. Right, and suddenly, and I see something, I'm like, I'm a board member, I'm not,
In that
I'm
capacity.
ladling soup.
You're
Right?
labeling soup right now, yeah.
My job is to go to the ED and say, and if the ED maybe doesn't react the way that's any reasonable person would, right? And we've seen this, and not with Tina, but and actually in this other organization where I was ladling soup and the person had to be replaced. When we brought up an issue that came up, I wasn't the one who brought it up. They then brought it to the board and the board reviewed how things were going. Were there challenges? Because that's the oversight piece. And it's not to interfere with the mission, it's to, in this particular instance, the person was hitting on one of the other employees. And it was, stuff that needed to be enforced. So you gotta really be careful about crossing the streams.
You had said you had lots of questions.
Yeah, I actually kind of wanted to circle back, and I feel like, again, this is kind of a concurrent question with the strategic plan and the bylaw, but in your experience, do you think that it's beneficial for me as the chair to establish a bylaw committee, or when updating these bylaws, give like certain, so again, asking Tina to identify, okay, what parts of the, kind of like what you were just talking about with the strategic plan, would it be the same doing it with the bylaw too, the bylaws, I should say, and saying, look, I want you to focus on this part, I want you to focus on this part, or is it just beneficial to establish a bylaws committee, let them work on it, and then as a full board come back?
Well, in the case of the bylaws, the one problem you have is that it's a legal document. So if you had a lawyer on your board, which you guys used to have a lawyer, right? You had a lawyer on the board.
There was two.
We had two.
Two, that's right.
No, and I can't do it. I can't hold two roles in that state.
Oh.
Yeah, I know, I was purposely avoiding
Yeah,
Emmanuel
I can't,
because,
yeah, I can't.
because he is the chair.
Yeah, I can't hold
Right.
two roles.
So he's on every committee. Frankly, a chair should be on every committee.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to appear at everything, but has to be the person managing every committee. The chair and the ED are on every subcommittee, right? That's their jobs. But in that instance, the chair would turn around and give it to the lawyer, right?
Right.
If you don't have a lawyer, and not to say I want the extra work, but an outside counsel would be somebody who'd put together a first draft.
Okay.
Then you'd have maybe a couple of designees that could review it and see if it's fitting within what you want. And that those couple of people with yourself and Tina would do the observation and then bring it back to the committee as a whole.
Okay.
And the reason I say not everybody is because fine tuning this stuff would take forever. To Tina's point earlier, 12 people trying to have a discussion. 3 or 4 maximum
Yeah. I was
is
thinking,
really what you want to get involved. Maybe have a review, maybe have a couple of comments, and then get right back to it. We originally, when we were starting to get into the idea of this, we had like 4 or 5 people on the contract, right?
Yeah,
It was
and it whittled down to
unworkable.
just Rob and I.
It was
Honestly.
unworkable.
Yeah,
It was unworkable, not because, and everybody's doing a great job,
yeah,
but there's so many great ideas, you can't have them like, oh, we gotta get together, everybody together. It's just tough.
Right.
And they themselves, the committee members, I could feel the frustration. So you whittle it down and then they bring it to the group and the group comments. And that kind of, respiration of the idea is very useful.
Thank you. That's helpful. Thanks.
Quick question, I also have a question.
Yes.
Which should be enacted first, the bylaws or the strategic plan / vision?
Simultaneously. You move forward. I mean, the bylaws are not gonna be that, I'm gonna tell you right now, the bylaws are not. Are not going to be a very intricate thing. They have to be modernized. There's very standard, Emmanuel will probably agree with this legally. There's very standard sets of bylaws out there for nonprofits that are pretty regular across the industry, the good ones. You fine tune them a little bit, tweaks and here and there for the particular organization, but for the most part, they follow a structure of this hierarchy that divides up, has terms, has decision-making powers, things like that. That's a pretty fast thing. It's not going to be very complicated. The strategic plan, you're talking about a year worth of work for you guys. Like really intense. You don't agree?
I mean, I've written and implemented 2 5-year strategic plans within 3 months' time, so. It depends on what we wanna do. And I think ours, I would say at minimum 6 months, yes, minimum 6 months just to draft it.
But you
So-
gotta do the information gathering and stuff like that, yeah. I mean, that's where
Well, if you're going full on needs assessment, yes, but we've had a recent needs assessment,
so
so
that-
we have those tools.
great. So you've already
Um,
started. You're
Yeah,
halfway there.
so we would actually just, I mean, if you think about it, our current strategic plan is 5 years old and we've hit almost every point of it, you know, it expires next fiscal year, or at the start of next fiscal year. Which is end of June. So my intention was to be able to launch a new strategic plan on July 1, right?
Right.
It, to start with, it doesn't have to be a 30-page document. Right, this is the great thing about a strategic plan, it's a living, breathing roadmap for our success. When I first started writing them, they were like, oh, you gotta do 5 to 7 to 10-year plans, and I'm like, why would you do that in our industry? Why on earth would you
Yeah.
ever write a 5 to 7-year plan when the technology changes every
Yeah.
6 months?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now I advocate for 3 to 5 years with a long-term goal set, right? You always want to go for that. So maybe we have the conversation, an in-depth conversation about the long-term goal set and how we're gonna implement those plans. That's my personal professional opinion, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah, no, and because you have a needs assessment done, then I think
Yeah.
you're well on your way. It is industry specific as to how these things are put together, so I agree with that. I would also say that when you do the strategic plan, I've always advocated for the board to set aside a meeting that is separate from everything else.
Yep.
You have a special called meeting, you sit down, you spend the day with a mediator or a guidance person that you bring in, a consultant,
Yeah,
You might have a friend.
right?
Yeah.
Certified mediators are really good at these things, but really people who are consultants that you bring in and they help you to sit down and process what it is you are, identity, these type of things. You know, it helps a good, that's the way I've done them in the past, so.
And I will actually share that the Massachusetts Cultural Council is doing amazing things with their grant funding now. I just had an email come across my desk today saying that they are providing grants for nonprofit organizations to do strategic planning, organizational redevelopment.
Oh,
And so I'm ready to push the button on that grant submission, you know, if we want to do something like that, because then it doesn't come out of our hot budget, right? And we're still making that movement forward. And I feel like this particular grant funder has made such a commitment to our organization. They're the one that paid for the feasibility study. They've committed money to our art salons and the film building program. So like, I think they're really excited to see what our organization is doing. And so I think there's funding available there. And stuff
So
like that.
one of my other organizations, it's a theater in Boston. They're amazing organization, Social Justice Theater. And they are in the middle of doing their strategic plan. They brought in this outside consultant. He does this type of work from New York. He has met with the employees, right, to get their feedback anonymously, separately, met with the board. He's met with the stakeholders from outside. He engaged each one of them in conversation so that each one can synthesize their view of what they believe the organization is. Not because you as a board decide to accept all of it, but because it gives you an idea of what people actually think you are. And UMA has done a great job of getting this information in the past. So you may not need that, but that's what their idea was. Who are we? Right? Before we decide to pursue a direction. And we may think you're one thing, and then the world of Malden is going to turn around and say, no, you aren't, you are this. And that means something as well. So.
Well, and I would say to the point of the needs assessment, yes, if you're doing a strategic plan, you almost always want to have a needs assessment. Does everybody in here know what a needs assessment is? Yes.
Yeah, we did, didn't
I'm
we?
assuming, so maybe you should
Those-
5,000 foot level, it's basically you get feedback from your community about what they think of your organization, what they think your services are, it's just a huge amount of data collected, and we're actually required to collect that data every time we do a franchise renewal, so since we just did our renewal like 2 years ago, I would say the needs assessment is pretty accurate, and we'll have to do another one I don't think we have to do it with Verizon, but I think Comcast we will.
Yeah, their agreement says.
So every 10 years, we get this big needs assessment done, so.
Yeah, no, that helps you. That gives you, it gives you a kickstart, like I said,
Yeah.
but those are the avenues that help you to, formulate this. But as far as the bylaws, which was the original beginning of this conversation, the bylaws can be done pretty quickly, in my view.
Do you have a copy? I've just got a copy. Do you have any templates from, is it possible to get a template or templates of whatever you have from other organizations?
Sure.
Just as a guide?
Yeah.
Please.
I just have to, we gotta take a look at
Yeah.
it, strip them out.
I was just gonna say, yeah, just redact, yeah, redact.
Remove that
Redact
organization.
Yeah, redact like all of it.
Yeah.
I have some, I mean, there's some nonprofits out there that have membership levels versus, so you guys are a board of trustees, some have an overarching member level that kind of runs things on a national basis. There's then, sometimes there's a chair that's appointed from an outside organization that's the founder of the organization. So there's a bunch of different models. So I'd like to find the simplest one, because
Okay.
you guys are a local nonprofit. You're not one of these,
Just a board of directors is our oversight.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. And I think we might want to also, when looking at the bylaws, look at what was called out in the contract with the city to ensure that that is
Right.
included within the bylaw system.
Sorry, not to create more work for you.
No, I mean, but you guys can decide whether or not, you wanna have us engage, or you wanna try to get it done yourself. I mean, this is a decision for the board and a decision as to what should be done next. And, as Tina said, it wouldn't necessarily be me, my office, there are 7 attorneys in the office. We do a lot of different things, real estate, corporate formation, contracts. I do a lot of nonprofit and corporate deals, is really my expertise. I also do litigation, which I wanted to leave for the last 20 years, but somehow they keep dragging me back in. But I have a very good attorney who does a lot of these bylaws and setting up corporate governance documents. She's actually a patent attorney as well, so she's
wow.
very technically astute.
Wow.
Yeah, she decided she didn't like
Number
doing
on speed
patents.
dial.
Man,
She
Yeah.
didn't like doing patents, and so she wanted to do corporate governance, but she still has that expertise, which gives her a great eye towards hitting every detail. So she'd be somebody who I'd have
Yeah.
you work with.
Fantastic.
Yeah, Katie's a partner. She's not one of the named partners. She's been with us 10 years and she's amazing, really good at this stuff. But that sort of thing can be helpful.
If the board wanted to retain your services for purposes of drafting the bylaws, what would be the timeline to implementation, in your opinion?
I think you get bylaws done within a couple of months. I don't think it's gonna take that long. I mean, it's really up to how often the board wants to see views and discuss them and discuss different pieces and that sort of thing. And it's not gonna be a complicated thing, because like I said, these are pretty standardized. We're gonna come up with a bunch of different ideas. We're gonna give you a view of those if we got involved in that piece. And then, you say, we don't need it to be, for instance, do you amend yourselves and say that you can expand your board? And how many people is the board supposed to be? Now, you've been dealing with the number you have, right?
Actually, we just amended the bylaws in September. That's why this document is updated to 11.
And so, but how many do you think it should be? Is 11 the number that feels good?
I think that was the designation at the time of the amendment, yes.
And I can't remember what.
It originally was 9.
It was, but I think it was to expand to include. I think it was to include more appointed seats, I think at that point, and I think that's why we expanded, I believe, but. I mean, that's like.
But what is the number that, I mean, when you look around at the tasks that you're doing, right?
Mhm.
Board seats
Great question.
are based upon what are the tasks necessary for the organization's health. It's not
Yeah.
based upon how many people do we want in the room,
Right, right.
it's how many people do we need in the room.
And I think that was the line of thinking at that time. If I recall that conversation, I mean, it's going back 2 years ago. I do believe that the idea was, to your earlier point, somebody somebody who had an HR background, somebody who had this back. So I think that's what we were moving towards in expansion, but I mean, again, I'd have to go back.
So
That's
if I
the
recollect
concept
myself,
earlier.
right,
So
yeah.
now here comes now you're gonna get the
Assets.
other view of board, right? There's the different jobs you need.
Mm.
And then there's the 4 or 5 seats extra that you need for the people with pockets,
Mm,
One, two.
right?
mm,
Because that's how a board is, like, you go out to the community and you find the person who's just retired and really, really wants to be involved in community and has the ability to pass you 5 figures a year because that's how they feel good about what they're doing in life, and it's their goal to improve communications and community involvement and stuff like that, right? That's a necessary decision for a board. You can't just have a board that's full of professionals that, you know, can put in the labor, because an organization exists on 3 pieces: time, talent, and treasure. You need people who have time. You need people who have, and not everybody has it, but if they don't have it, they better have talent, or they better have treasure. Very rarely do you get all 3. And when you do get all 3, you keep that person locked in a closet and pull them out.
Yeah.
Because that's, I mean, I've had a couple of organizations that person becomes the chair for 9 years. They go off for 1 year and then they come back for another 9 because you need them, right?
Yep.
So it's really important when you're structuring your board and deciding on the number that you have enough seats. And you don't have to fill every seat, right?
Yeah, the 3 Ts.
I actually gotta write that down. That was fantastic. Yeah.
Time, talent, and treasure.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna like embroider that on.
There's a reason people ask me to speak every once in a while.
It sounds like a triangle, like pick 2 of these.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, when asking them about, so I know you talk, so going back to with the 3 Ts and about the treasurer, right? Or the treasurer. Does it have to be, so it could be obviously somebody who's gonna deep pockets, or could it be somebody, like, could we also look at somebody in the community who is part of a bigger organization that just loves to give money to, like, there's no conflict, I guess is what I'm trying to ask. Somebody who would be a designee or representative of, I don't know, a larger nonprofit or corporation that just loves to give money to, you know,
That's culture.
Sure.
right?
Sure. That's a treasure, right?
And there's no conflict of interest with that, right? Like, there's no.
No, I wouldn't, conflicts of interest arise with nonprofits, right? And you guys do a conflict check every
I'm
year?
not trying to right now in the middle.
We actually don't even have a conflict of interest state policy,
I didn't hear that.
right?
I just thought that I'm trying to.
Sorry.
But the idea here is when it comes to conflicts of interest, right? You need to be careful of whether or not your funds are going to individuals who have a self-interest motive, right? For instance, you know, and I'm not, you turn to me and you say, "Oh, Rob, would you like to join our board?" I'm sorry, but no,
Right.
right?
Right.
Come on,
I'm
son.
doing work for you guys. If I became a board member, I would not do the work unless it was a special project, right? Special projects, you make that exception, and then it's in my statement, it says, I was paid for the special project because I was the best talent available, right? And I've done that for my clients, but I don't do the day-to-day like consulting on these different pieces, because as the attorney for the organization, if Brian comes to me and says, "Rob, I gotta talk to you about something," right? I need to act as the attorney in the best interest of the organization. If I'm a board member, it gets a little bit dicey, right? How do I deal with that situation? Do I, listen to one board member versus another board member because, we've become friends and blah, 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 and all this other stuff, right? So you gotta be careful about that. Also, you guys do a great job. I'm looking around and you've got good diversity, not the best, but we've got representation and you've got gender equality and things like that, and that's stuff that also should be laid out. Right? It's gotta be, if it's part of your mission, it's gotta be out there. So I bring all of that up because that's when you're designing these bylaws, when you're designing these strategic plans, a lot of this stuff really you need to think about it. So. Any other questions? And I apologize if I go on too much.
Are you charging us by the word?
Yeah.
Letter.
Well. Better than me.
Modern world.
So I really want to thank Rob for taking
Yeah.
some time because I realize that, as I'm going through operational excellence with the organization itself in everyday duties, I realize that there are some checkpoints that we need to address as the board, right? Like there are governance documentations that we should have in place in public because of our 501(c)(3) status and et cetera. So I really do appreciate you taking the time to come in tonight and say it better than I could ever do it. Yeah, and I don't know if anyone else has other questions, we can talk offline about potential assistance and that sort of thing.
And I would also advise you're open to the public, you're transparent, but also keep in mind that there are going to be times when you need, on every agenda, there should be an executive session, 2-level executive session. First level is that you do say, we're going into executive session now, and the cameras get turned off so that you can discuss things like employment, specific things that come up that Tina might need to bring to your attention about specific issues. Okay, that's number one. Number two, there's second level where Tina is asked to leave the room so that you guys can have a discussion about whether or not you see, because your minds together formulate whether or not there's still cohesion, and not that there isn't, but the next person in line may not be gelling. And that's an important obligation of the board to make sure that you head off where there's a divergence with the person you've selected, right? And that also fills Tina with faith that you guys are reviewing what she's doing, right? This isn't about challenging each other. It's about taking the time, because she can consider what she thinks of you guys because she's alone and can think of it and say, Emmanuel's a problem. I've got to get him off the board.
Most people
I don't say that. I don't say that.
But you guys don't have the ability to do this outside of the group. You've got to have an official meeting, you've got to sit down, and then you've got to have this discussion, because some of you may notice some things and you got to head it off before it starts to create a problem. Or bring it up so that Tina gets direction and it isn't just sprung on her because everybody noted it, but they didn't want to talk about it in front of Tina, right? That's not the way it works. So this is all about the health of the organization. It's nothing personal about any other person.
Would you always keep that agenda item on, even if we don't use
Yes.
it, always keep it on there?
I would have the 2 levels.
Yeah.
And I'd say, as chair, you're gonna have a discussion with Tina ahead of time about what goes through the first 2, like the public, and then the first level, meaning the
Personnel.
the personnel and private things. And then separately, you may have your co-chair or your assistant, your vice chair, or your committee, your E-committee, right? The heads say to you, we need to have a discussion about X, Y, and Z, and we'd like Tina not to be in the room for that, right? That's where your power comes in, not to micromanage her, but to talk about the strategic plan. Right? So that then you can come together as a unit. But I also caution you, there is very, very seldom reason to have that second level,
Right.
that third level, right? That third level is really reserved for, do we have anything? 99% of the time, it's going to be nothing, but it needs to be there for you to have that final control.
And
It's
so,
about the checks and balances.
and so what I've been doing, anytime that we have to go into like an executive session, something I kind of learned from my previous life that I served was that on the record, I would officially state, we're going into executive session for the purposes of this discussion, and there's a good possibility we're not gonna, there's a good possibility that we are going to adjourn in there. We're not gonna come back out to the public forum and adjourn that way.
Yeah, as long as your agenda is posted,
Okay,
you don't have to ever come back out.
Yeah.
Right? You're adjourning the general meeting, it's over.
Yeah.
Whatever happens after that, there's no need to
Okay.
even go that
okay,
far.
okay.
And to follow up on just one thing Rob said, because, I have come into this position with the mindset that I want to set up this organization for success for the next 20, 30, 50 years, right? It's how I work every day when I come into my office. So this work is in my mindset, the work that needs to be done to make this organization successful for the next 20, 30, 50 years, right? So all this governance work, once it's done, and you can move forward.
Mhm.
So it's a lift, but I believe it's well worth doing, so.
So I appreciate the time with you guys. If anybody's got any questions, I'll let you get to the rest of your business because everybody wants to get home at some point, right?
Yeah, we're on item number 2 of the agenda.
I apologize if I spoke too much.
No,
Yeah,
this
we
was great.
appreciate
No,
you.
this was
Yeah,
great.
thank you.
This was
I
great.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. All right. Nice to meet you all. If you ever need me to come back, just let me know. I'm happy to show up and have a discussion with the board.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Rob.
All right, guys. Take care.
Good night.
Sure.
Okay. All right.
So are you officially?
I'm
taking over
officially
the-
taking over the meeting. Thank you to Karen for.
Do we need to motion that? Okay.
Go right into it. And is there any, I mean, I know we spent a lot.
We
of
did the
time.
minutes already,
Okay.
and just we're on Rob, so we're on item number 3.
So I was gonna say if there was any other further discussion on what Rob discussed, but I think that.
Do we need to follow up like next steps or is that at the end?
I mean, we can, right? I mean, we can, there's a few things I wanted to, and that's
Cause
gonna
that
be.
was a lot of information,
Yeah,
but I
that's-
don't wanna just leave it there and not.
No, that's in my,
That's
that's,
great.
yeah.
It's in our minutes.
I'll bring it up in new business. How about that? So, all right, moving on to the next agenda item.
Hold on I want to leave that until we have action items from that last
Thank
one,
you.
because that was a lot of information. I want to know what's happening as a result of it. I don't want to just have had that be a bunch of information we got and not actually have a clear idea of what's happening as a result of it.
Sure.
Like are the bylaws being done, or you're getting information, like he offered to provide a template, is like, what's happening and who's the responsibility for doing the things as a result of that discussion?
So I will reach out to Rob. Actually, I was gonna talk to Tina more about how to get in touch with Rob about getting those templates of the bylaws. I would like to follow up on the bylaws, and then I would like to either possibly think about putting where it's gonna go, right? Are we using Rob? Are we using Rob's office? Am I gonna have to put a committee together? To go over the bylaws? I mean, that's something I guess. Might as well just talk about that at this point, right?
There are other lawyers too,
I-
right? I
And
mean,
there's other lawyers in his
just to
office.
put
Yeah,
that-
Let me
but there are
clarify.
other lawyers in Malden too, right? I
Yes,
mean,
but let me
Okay.
jump in here and say that Rob gives us a very generous discount on his services as part of a pro bono.
okay,
So what would normally it would normally cost us 4 to 5 to 6 times what he charges us to assist in these matters. Not to say that we shouldn't, look around, but I just want to clear that up. I think my feedback to this would be not only the bylaws, but I've mentioned a couple different times, there's some government, I'm using the wrong word. Governance documents that need to be implemented. And it may be a good idea to create a checklist. And say, okay, bylaws are done. This document's done, there's another document I talked to you about that
Yep.
needs to be implemented. And have that, and then have that presented to the board. With maybe a template or a plan, and then, work grouping it, so that's my suggestion, because. What if we hit the bylaws, but then we forget about all these other things that need to get put into place, right? So that would be my suggestion.
and so all right, so to go on, going off that, and so that's what I was sitting here thinking about for a little while too, right? So. In the interest of time for all of us, do we feel that it is beneficial for us to, like I said, form a committee? Do several different committees have to be formed where we're all working on it, or do we think that? The better use of the board's time and everybody else's time, and to Tina's point, that we work on the bylaws, we work on the strategic plan, but then we forget about other documents. Do we think that it's beneficial for us to collaborate or outsource, or however you wanna call it, with, saying outside counsel, but as we know, it's Rob's group, right? Like, so I guess that's my question posed to this group right here. What do we want? I mean, You got, I mean, I know, again, we just got thrown a lot of information for the last hour. And does everybody wanna just think about it? Do you guys want time to think about it and go home, or do you guys wanna?
I can
have
email
further
my
discussion
minutes
about it.
out tonight, tomorrow.
Well, I can say right now, I don't have the legal background to draft or to review bylaws with any competency. And if somebody else here does and feels that they are capable and confident in drafting bylaws, then great, we'll do it internally. And if not, I think we just retain him. He's got templates, we can take them, revise them and move on with life.
I think before we do that, the idea of getting your checklist of what needs to be done. So if some of this stuff needs to be put into the bylaws or anything, we can do it all at once and not have to go back and forth.
And of course, with, we're thinking also too with the contract that's gonna be signed. When asking about a breach, right, I don't wanna be in breach of the contract, right? I know that they're giving us 120 days to clear this up, but. I'd rather not be in, I'd rather not commit a breach unintentionally, right? I mean, of course, it doesn't matter if it's unintentional or intentional, a breach is a breach, doesn't matter, so. Obviously, I'm not trying to influence, but I think that, to your point, Brian, right, like. I think it's in the best interest of us to outsource it to the people, to the people who actually do this for a living, than us just trying to work on it. And then obviously the time component comes into it as well, right? I mean, where it's something that should be taking 6 months, all of a sudden is now taking longer, and again, we forget about it. So for me, I'm fine with, obviously, I think to Rob's recommendation that you and I would be a part of those discussions, I think, right? And then we would present it out to the full board, which I'm comfortable with, but again, I mean, it's to the, to the decision of the full board, if that's which way you guys wanna go, or if you guys want to try to head this beast on.
There was a bylaws committee, right? I mean, is that still in existence, or is that with the old board and this is now a new board because an annual meeting happened? And I don't know who was on it. I don't recall being on it.
No, good question, no.
But wouldn't they make the decision to move forward with outside counsel, or, there could be a subcommittee meeting with the bylaws committee and they could choose. But I don't know if that puts us even further, because then maybe they have to
Feels
come
like
back.
we're going
Okay.
backwards,
And I
right?
wanna step in here, I've been on multiple bylaws committees, it drags on.
Okay,
forever,
Yeah, yeah.
because we have
I
voices,
just
voices.
know there's a
Yeah.
But
committee,
it's
but why
really how
have a
this
committee?
group wants to approach this project,
Right.
honestly, so that's the conversation.
I like
Right.
the idea of getting all the documents you were talking about, the list from city stuff, and then going forward and having you guys work with whatever lawyer or whatever.
Yeah, that's how I felt, I mean, I think a lawyer, I thought you meant to, have somebody else do the bylaws, but it's somebody else with you, at least you two as the spokespeople for us. I mean, that makes sense to me, wouldn't take it, I can see where a lot of voices could make it go on and on.
Do we have to have the bylaws done before we can move down the list? Or do the bylaws impact the other items that need to
Yeah.
be done?
Yeah,
They do,
more or less.
so we'll probably need that list first then.
Yeah.
Who's doing that?
I can have that done, if you give me a timeline and when you want it, do you want it done by the next meeting, do you want it done sooner, like what is the question?
I think if we can get it done, get it to us sooner so that we can adjust it.
What's
And
relative?
then get it ready for the next meeting and figure out, because I don't even know. I mean, I know there's the conflict of interest, there's bylaws, there's the contract working with the bylaws.
Strategic
What
plan,
else?
Right?
So here's
Strategic plan,
what I
yeah.
could suggest to the board. As a current solution is that Emmanuel and I meet on a regular basis for, updates and such one-on-one, and we could have a conversation about what we think the list is. And present that to the board in email format.
It's either email format, or if everybody wants, without tying up everybody's time, a special meeting, but. It's what do you guys feel comfortable with? Do you guys want? Like for me to reserve, to the call of the chair to like call a meeting, or do you want it in email fashion and in real life update as we go?
Email would be great.
Email.
I might be the only one who wants like an emergency meeting or something like that.
Or if there's, or
I'm just, but if the consensus is an email, that's fine.
or if, you know what, or I could say it this way, right? So Tina and I will work on this, we'll update. If there is a need, or if there's a feeling that there needs to be an emergency meeting to discuss something further, then I can call one to the call of the chair, I can reserve that, I reserve that right, I should say,
Right.
to do that. And if need be, then that's what we would do, if there was anything that we need to clear up, or any
Fair.
confusion or anything like that, how about that?
That works
That
for
works?
me.
Does that work?
Well, and to be clear, the full board would have to vote approval on the final bylaws
Bylaws,
and,
right.
and all governing
All
documents,
documents.
documents,
Correct.
so. it will never move forward unless the full board approves.
Yeah, there's no
Right.
unilateral
Right.
decisions.
Yeah.
So you're
So,
gonna work on a list of the stuff that needs to get done from a legal
well,
document.
let me clarify that. Are we working on a list or are we just moving forward with getting this done?
I thought we were gonna be working
the
on the
bylaws.
list. Yeah,
Okay.
I thought we were working, unless I'm misunderstanding what everybody's. I'm under the impression that as right now where we are at this point, you and I are working on the list of what
Okay.
needs to be done. Unless I'm misunderstanding this.
And we need this list for the bylaws? Or
No,
can we,
so
can we get Robert to?
These things are-
Do the bylaws?
To my understanding
Wow.
of this, and correct me if I'm wrong, this feels like this all has to be more or less done concurrently, right? I mean, I know the bylaws are important, but also the strategic plan is important. I know also getting what you guys incorporate in your contract into the so these are all more or less running
Right.
concurrently at this.
They
particular
can't be
point.
siloed.
Right, this is not I don't think this would be this
Well,
is,
and all of this stuff could be in our bylaws too, conflict of interest statement, other things. He was talking about our commitment to inclusion
Right.
statements, so
Yeah.
this all could be one document that we're talking about different pieces of governance that we need to know that we're hitting.
Hey, can I ask a question real quick? Do we
No.
know if the discount that Pete seems to be offering, does that apply to the Katie colleague of his, who he seemed to be like clearly signaling would be really sharp and helpful?
My experience has been that we are benefactors through his
Yeah.
whole office. When I've talked about working with other employees at the office, it's for simpler things like looking over contracts and stuff like that. He's helped us save money by passing that off onto somebody else that's not charging his arm and a leg
Sure.
sort of thing. So it's, yeah. And again, we do have a budget for legal.
Yeah, because just like reading
assistance.
the tea leaves, it sounds like what he was saying is like, she would be excellent
Yeah.
for this.
Yeah, oh yeah, she
Yeah.
sounds fantastic.
Yeah,
and you know, and I think that it's money well spent too as well, right? Like, again, you know, I go back to. I know I'm gonna say, but like a breach is a breach, right? So like, I'd rather not.
Stop saying that.
It's-
Makes me nervous.
That's what contract law, a breach is a breach, like, that's what we, but like, I would rather be in compliance with everything than versus, you know. We find out that we've been doing something and it's like, oh shoot, like now we have, you know, within so much time to cure it and. I'd rather not, you know, I'd rather do it right the first time, and if we have to spend money on it, or, you know, thankfully Rob is. You know, not killing us on the price, but I would rather do it right the first time than have to like look back on it and say, oh crap, like, you know, we need to do this again, or we need to revise this, so.
Okay, so what's happening?
Yeah, do we vote on this or?
I don't,
This doesn't need a
I
vote.
do not think we
No.
need a vote on this one,
Okay.
we do not need a vote.
I have one more question. I thought in the beginning it was gonna be you two and a lawyer. We don't need the lawyer to do the bylaw.
No, that's what we are talking about, yes.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about. So it'll be Tina and I, and then, you know, working with Rob, and then,
You're doing a legal needs assessment and then contracting with
correct,
Demarco to implement, right?
correct.
Okay,
Great.
That is correct.
now I'm ready to move on.
So that-
That should go in the minutes, exactly the way Brian said it.
I thought I was being clear and eloquent, but apparently I was
Need
not,
to use the
so.
restroom.
And this is all happening before the next meeting.
I just want to
Yeah,
know,
it's gonna
right?
happen
Hopefully.
quickly,
Tina,
yeah.
Yeah.
will do
This is gonna happen, this is gonna
assessment
happen,
and then
happen real
contract.
fast.
They're gonna do an assessment of our legal needs and then they're gonna work with Demarco to implement.
I would say governance needs, I wouldn't even say.
I'm
legal,
not
I would say
gonna last
governance.
much longer, folks, so
Right.
whatever we gotta get done.
Right?
Yeah,
We
all
get
right,
that
so we can take some of these, so we can take some of these things out of order if we want.
Something needed to be decided.
Yeah, the
tonight.
HVAC, but Tina just went to the bathroom.
Right,
We
last
need
week, she
to.
just stepped away.
You need to be-
Have a board. with the
HVAC.
position
We can take.
design.
Oh, yeah.
That might be good to.
The HVAC information was sent prior to the meeting. We don't need her here. We can really just vote
Go
on
and
it.
vote on it?
Looking for a vote on the HVAC
Yeah.
system, which is broken and needs to be replaced. Just gone out and done it.
Assessment
Review
on
with a
this.
bunch of people.
right.
It sounds like
It's a good
Sullivan
deal,
though is
right?
the place she
Yes.
wants to go
Yeah.
because she gets a good discount
Get a
from
good
them.
discount from them. And yeah, I'm not an HVAC expert.
Is it, if these are cheap and she wants them, go for it.
And so if we want to approve it, then I will, if there's. unless
Well,
there's
we'll
further
wait
discussion.
for her comment, but
Okay, so
But
then-
but it says right here, out of pocket cost is 9,400 compared to the other bid that was way over that.
and I believe because it's over $5,000, this is why we're looking for a vote. Yeah, I
Yes.
think that's the reason.
Yeah, just make sure this is what she wants.
Yeah.
talk about the HVAC.
14,000.
Did you do election of officers?
Not yet, we're taking this out of order. Everybody's starting to fade, so I'm just kind of skipping around. And if we have to table the election of board officers, we can just table that too. Actually, matter of fact, I actually can't make that motion. Somebody needs to bring that up. we'll go down to number 3, but if somebody wants, I'll entertain any motions on the next agenda item for,
The HVAC?
nope,
No,
number
the,
3.
I will entertain.
Oh,
You don't, you
Okay.
need, you just say you just table it.
Okay,
Perfect, table by Eden.
okay.
That'll come up in the next,
I will
that'll come up next month then,
okay.
for election of board officers.
So we're then still
So now
in
we're at-
interim status
Correct, for
Okay.
right now.
for clarification.
Everything stays the same. All right. We're at agenda item number 4. We are looking at the HVAC system update and vote. I know that you had sent it out. We were just talking about it, but
Yeah, I'm gonna make it super quick. In case you haven't noticed, our main HVAC system is done. It's over 20 years old. Recommendation is to replace it and quite frankly, our HVAC supplier did us a huge solid by finding us a huge rebate to get a heat pump system in place. It's gonna cost us less than $10,000, which is unheard of.
Yeah.
So I'm asking the boards, because I'm required to, I'm asking for the board's approval to spend that money to have our HVAC system replaced.
all right,
Yes.
with that being said, I will entertain any motions right now. For
Motion to
further
approve
discussion.
that.
No, for further discussion first.
Uh,
But go ahead, on John's motion for discussion on the HVAC, is there a second? I see Karen's hand up for the second, so now this is probably before us. Any discussion on the HVAC system and vote before we take it? Any further discussion? Seeing that I do not see any further discussion, we could just approve it. We don't need a roll call. Actually, we'll do a roll call vote.
Radio,
Yep.
Yes.
Brian,
Approved.
Eden,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
do you wanna vote?
I don't.
Right?
What
All
if
right,
you
so
were-
any
I
any
can't believe
opposed?
that price.
No,
Yeah.
no oppositions. Any abstentions? No abstentions. It passes.
Perfect.
On to the next
I
agenda
will-
item number 4.
So, I will sign the contract with them tomorrow and we should have a new unit installed within the next week.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, on to agenda item. Oh, it's the second number 4. I meant to put number 5, the ED report.
I'm just entertaining questions on my report. I'm assuming everybody read it with bated breath.
I did. I loved it.
Did you?
I did. Well, most of it I loved anyway. Yeah, that's how I knew that the document was the contract was being signed. I skipped right to that part.
Yeah, I saw that part.
I know, I slid it in there because I was like, here's, my wife said, here's what you should do. You should like put a challenge in your report and see if they bring it up. Cause then you know they're reading it. So I did, I wanted to kind of slide it in there and see, but also I didn't have a signed contract. Like tentative. So also I didn't want to make a big deal out of it until we had it, so. One thing I did want to point out, I'm actually glad you brought that up. Is that we are really on track financially, in our organization, and that makes me happy. I'd like to see a little bit more in the fundraising bucket. I'm sure Brian would. He's gonna have commentary on our financial report, but again, this is really only our second year of tracking. Fund development and grants, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm really encouraged by the numbers I'm seeing. Yeah. So questions?
Can we get more pictures next time? I'm joking.
Yeah.
I'm joking.
I'll throw a pen at you, Laura. Who's got time for pictures?
I
Man,
second the throwing of the pen.
I got the roof fix, we got the HVAC system going, we got the feasibility study done. So yeah, I wanted to save time for
The
discussion.
feasibility study.
Yeah.
I wanted
Talk
to
about that.
discuss.
Yeah.
I didn't know if there was a separate agenda item for that.
No, I encapsulate, I just put everything.
Oh, you didn't put that in
I
there?
just put it up, because I figured you were just gonna roll right into all.
Oh, okay, so before I jump into the feasibility study, I meant to make a note of that, and you're right on fading too here. We are having we are gonna be a part of the Chamber's Halloween event on Halloween from 3 to 5 PM. We're gonna do the same thing we did last year. It was extremely popular and people were really excited to do it, so we have them filter into the studio here and stand in front of the green screen and do spooky stuff, and then they filter out to the kitchen and come back around. We're looking for board volunteers to help with the flow of the event, and again, it's from 3 to 5 PM on Thursday of Halloween, if you're interested.
I'm interested.
Great.
It's not the same time as the senior Halloween event, right?
It's in coalition with the chamber event that's doing it at, they do the big thing down at the
Right, but
square.
it's after this, the senior Halloween event at the senior center that day.
I have no idea when that is.
What line?
Wouldn't that be in coalition with the?
I'm
I
not
don't
sure
know.
who's running
The
it, but I know
Halloween
it's, I think it's like
celebration?
11 to 2.
Well, then yes, it'll be at.
All right, so
Ours is 3 to 5.
I should be able to help this.
So the UMA team will do setup. It's really not a huge lift for setup. You're encouraged to dress up if you want to come, I'll be a butterfly. I am a butterfly every year. It's easy.
I'll be a witch.
Yeah, that's me. That's me. So yeah, that's an ask. Just let me know via email. That just helps me keep track of who's helping, if you can help. Or stop by, even stopping by, your presence is important, so. Feasibility study, so. I spent my day off on Monday, reading the beast, the 86 pages.
Yeah,
A reminder to the board that this document is what we could feasibly do, right? No, money was no object, what can we do in this organization?
right.
I don't know if anyone's had a chance to actually look it over. I hope that you've at least had a chance to look at the design aspects.
Yeah.
And
There are two, one in
There's
one in
two.
A and B, right?
so the request was to be provided a high-end and low-end option, right? So the low-end option is really kind of keeping the footprint and just cosmetic changes to the upper level, while still adding the lift to the lower level, and most of the work is done on the lower level. And that came in, I think, at a $5 million price point-ish, which was my max budget, by the way, when I was talking to this group. So I had to chuckle about that. High-end option is actually, I love this option, of course, because it's the more expensive one, but what it does is it raises the floor on the back of the building to be level with the front of the building, so we have an ADA accessible ramp all the way through the facility. It also puts in a ramp at the front. It flattens out our front storefront and puts in a ramp, so it's completely accessible from point A to point B. We have an additional fire exit if needed, that kind of thing. And then it also puts in a modular stage into our studio. So the stage actually rises up from the floor, and you can put it in any kind of configuration you want. And it's also accessible. So which is kind of cool. And then all these bells and whistles, right? So as I was going through what took me the most time was I actually went through the cost analysis, the cost estimate. And at one point they're charging $100 for a coat hook on the back of a bathroom door.
Yeah,
Well,
of course.
I can't justify spending $100 for a coat hook on the back of the
Right.
bathroom door. So when I look at these numbers, I kind of chuckle because I'm not, and they're talking about putting a plaster ceiling downstairs. Why are we using plaster? Why are we not using drywall, right? So, and that's my job. That's my job to come back at them and say, this is great. I love that we could feasibly do this. Now let's actually talk about what we can feasibly do, right? And so that's the next step for me, is to meet with them, to go over the study. I think it gives a lot of really great insight of where we want to be. I think it tells a great story of who we are and where we want to go. But the part of, and it also is kind of an eye opener, because everything that we told this company that we wanted, only about a third of it, maybe not even that, is feasibly accomplished here in this facility.
Mhm.
So it begs the question, and it makes more research. Do we continue to be here in this facility, or do we find a facility that is going to accomplish all the things we want to do in partnership with our community? So this is a building block to
Mhm.
identifying where UMA's home is going to be in the future. That's what I have right now.
I think this is the best place.
You think it's the best place?
It could be really, straightened out and stuff, made more modern and usable. Because of where it is in the city.
Location is
Yeah,
a key factor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Debatable, I think, though.
Yeah.
I think it's debatable. It depends on what's out there and, if we moved, how much do we get for this?
Mhm.
What can we afford? I mean, obviously you'd have to
Yeah.
build out something. wherever you go.
Yeah.
So long story short, now we know what we need to spend to get where we want to be within the confines of this space. The next step is to find out more information of what's out there currently. How much are people charging? Is it for sale or is it for rent? Is there space? Do we have, how many open office spaces do we have? We want to look at, getting revenue by providing office rental. Well, how many open rentals are out there right now? And what are they charging for,
Mhm.
right? And so is that a sustainable model
Right.
for us? This is the information, so for the next probably 6 months is the next step, is gathering that
Mhm.
information.
I mean, I obviously know Adam's a realtor and
Mhm.
he hopefully will be on the board soon. But also there's, I don't know if it's a conflict of interest, but somebody like Kevin Duffy that does, I feel
We
like.
already have a call into Kevin, yeah.
Okay.
So Kevin's gonna have that data, right?
Right.
He's gonna
Good.
tell us.
And he knows
exact- yeah.
availability and
Yeah.
he's part of the city and.
But what I'm trying to point out as a responsibility as part of this process, we're looking at every app.
Okay,
Mhm.
right.
Right? We're not just saying, okay, this is what we're gonna do now. Because if we do this, there's no potential for growth anymore.
Right.
It's it,
And you can't go back either.
and you can't go back. Might change it, but our footprint is our footprint. You think about it, you think about a starter home compared to a family home, right? Your footprint is your footprint. And you either need to make the decision that you're gonna stay within your footprint, or do you wanna grow beyond?
And you're saying that they have accomplished a third of what you really wanted out of this
I
study?
guess that's maybe not a fair, maybe about 50% of what I really
Right,
really
but
envisioned.
still 50%, yeah,
Right,
okay.
But
Is
I
that-
guess then the bigger question is like, you brought up starter versus family, but I feel like technology is changing so quickly. Do we need more room? Right? Like what was missing that required more space?
it's not so much about the technology, it's about the programs we wanna offer, right? So we've heard things like Black Box Theater, we have heard about community gathering spaces, we've heard about training resources, we've heard about digital equity, and we can have a hand in all of those things and have funding sources coming in for all of those things. Where are we gonna put all those things in this facility? Is the question. Right? And the designs that they came up, which is what I absolutely love the high-end design, because like
Multi-use.
it's so and that was the big number one word we used
Yeah.
constantly through the whole process was it has to be multi-use. Everything has to have multiple uses for it.
Which one was the one that had the offices downstairs that were in the middle? One of them had open community space, one of them had offices in the middle.
I think it was the low-end option.
The low end had the offices, yeah,
Mhm.
that didn't make any sense to me, that whole.
Right,
I mean, if you look at our annual meeting, it was
Yeah.
cramped.
Yeah.
There's no great
Super
way to
cramped.
have, like, what are you gonna, if you wanna have
Yeah.
after school classes, you're gonna have kids tripping over equipment, like, it's not a
Yeah.
great
It's like
space.
everybody congregates in the hall and it's tight and.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's a fire hazard too.
Yeah.
And it's fire hazard.
So what do we do with the feasibility study now it's done?
I'm gonna be following up, as I mentioned, with them clarifying some things. We have additional money in the grant funds right now. That I might be able to say to them, what can I do right now? Like, so you'll see that in both designs that they convert my office into a hot podcast set, right? It's the first
So
thing I
funny
said
that I
when I
brought that
said,
up with you too.
I know. It's the first thing I said when I walked into this facility, I went, oh, that should be the studio right there, right? Like, how cool is that to walk down the street and see them doing that?
Right.
But there's things. So my next step is to talk to them and say, okay, help me phase this out. So maybe we do the hot set and move my office somewhere. And maybe we demo the downstairs to the studs, because everything's gotta be replaced.
Yeah.
Let's phase this out. So that's the thing. But the work that needs to be done first is, should we be spending our money doing that?
Where does the funding come from?
For
Everything.
different, there's a ton of grants out there for capital improvement projects. I've got 3 of them sitting in my inbox right now.
So the goal would be to raise the funds for any capital improvements. through
Absolutely,
direct grant
100%.
writing.
My goal is to not use any cable funding for capital improvements in this facility. Couple different reasons. Which I'd be happy to bring up in executive session, maybe. I don't know if I can do that or not, so. But my goal is to use cable funding primarily for cable services from here on out, because of the because they're dwindling, right?
Yeah.
And if we want to expand our resources into more of the media arts world, we have to fund those programs
Mhm.
outside of cable funding.
Yeah.
So,
In terms of like potentially moving, is the courthouse just off the table completely?
It's off the
This one?
table.
I am not willing to comment on the courthouse project at this time.
That's fair.
I don't know where we are on the agenda, but that's okay.
What else?
No, I'm saying, no, I don't,
Yeah.
but it's not on the agenda, but I'm saying if we wanted to have discussions around some of those topics, we can go into executive, but not tonight, obviously.
Yeah.
All right. With that being said, any further question?
Yeah, any other questions on the feasibility study?
No.
I encourage you to read it. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
I have many more, but not for here.
Because it's 8:40.
Yeah. Yeah, please take the time to read it. It's really well done.
Very
It's a-
small
It's a thick
print.
document.
Blow it
You
up.
can zoom in on your refrigerator.
You can go it out there.
There, you
Check the
need you need
temperature.
touchscreen. You can.
Oh.
All right,
okay,
if there are no
about
further
that.
discussion or
Thank
questions, we're gonna roll right into the finance report.
you. Mhm.
The only thing I wanted to comment on was the audit was completed, and it was fine, but I don't know if anyone had a chance to read the comments from Leonard, Muller and Green. They specifically had a memo attached, which I had open that I wanted to bring to the board's attention. It reiterates some of the things that I've been talking about over the past couple of years, and while we're within budget for the first time this past year, that doesn't mean that we're financially self-sustaining. Meeting your budget goals does not mean being in the black, right? We are struggling. This is an inflection point for UMA financially, and we're on a timer. And so, and this is what they're saying is the overall condition is, I'm going to read it straight up because I think it's worth reading. They have several discussions with Charles Rannigan, who's the controller for the city of Malden. During those discussions, they came to find that the revenues from Comcast and Verizon are diminishing in a substantial amount. This reduced revenue results in the organization experiencing a significant loss in 2024. So while we're within the budget, we're still at a loss. It's imperative that other revenue streams are developed in the very near term, or expenses will have to be reduced dramatically to offset the diminishing revenue from the city. There is not a lot of places to cut revenue outside of staff, so that would mean staff cuts. Unfortunately, the organization does not have sufficient net assets to incur significant losses. That means we can't we can't sell stuff to make up for any deficiency. It has to come from grants being written or revenue being generated and that has to be done through additional services. That was really the big one I wanted to bring to everybody's attention. There's some other things regarding control of, oversight and control. I think there's been a lot of systems put into place to do a really good job of oversight, and I haven't seen any oversight issues in my own audits as well as the internal audits. There's still a couple minor things, but I don't think it's worth the board's attention at this time. So I think what I want to press on everyone is, as we're talking about developing new bylaws and other things, is that I feel we are not moving fast enough in everything that we are doing. I've reached out to the Chamber of Commerce to ask if they have anybody that would be willing to come in and speak to UMA about entrepreneurship and small business. In order to grow, you have to move first and apologize later in many cases. It's, I'm glad that Mark was not here anymore, but you have to move and stop getting bogged down in bureaucracy. And I don't know what to do to light a fire under UMA in that regard. But I'm very, very concerned about economically being able to keep everyone here and doing the things that make UMA great. Sunshine and roses, I know, I'm sorry. But it's the reality. The economic reality is we have diminishing funds and we want to do more things. So the grants are great. I think this is the lifeline, is the grant writing that's been done, is moving away from the small money events and moving towards grant writing and seeking avenues of greater revenue generation potential is the way to go. But I just don't think we're moving fast enough personally. I think within a year, we're going to be forced to make very difficult decisions around selling physical properties or reducing staff. And I don't think that we can continue without staff. You have to have people to do the job.
Mhm.
Would you agree with that?
100%. We've been talking about it,
Yeah, we have.
and
been
now our
talking.
auditor is saying, it, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
So let's talk about action items then.
yes.
Number one, actually, does the audit have to come up for vote of approval?
It does.
Yeah,
Yeah, the audit has been passed out to the board for review. Larry sent it out. I've reviewed it. I have no comments to make at this time. Everything appears to be accurate. The auditors said that everything could be, they found no material omissions and found that everything was transparent. They did mention that we need to get a new bookkeeper, a new bookkeeper is in the works.
we're making a plan, yes, Marcel will be moving on, and so, but he's hanging in until we get everything settled on QuickBooks and figure things out. And will assist us in helping find a new bookkeeper.
Financially, our infrastructure, I think, is in good shape. I thought we found no issues with the audit and motion to discuss.
All right, so there's a motion to discuss further, seconded by Jonathan. Now it's before us properly. Any further discussion that needs to be brought up on what Brian's report is?
Just no, this is audit,
Yeah.
right?
The audit.
Well, that's what I'm saying, like any further discussion on the audit.
Oh.
We're not voting on it yet. Can't vote
Yeah.
on it yet until we have a little discussion piece. But seeing that there's nobody that wants to discuss, I will entertain any motions right now.
I will tell you that the thing that you should all be asking me is how long do we have?
Right, so I was thinking.
Right.
But can you answer that if we don't know what our
Yeah.
income is gonna be next year?
It's gonna be, we have to make something happen in a year.
Yeah.
And some of it's being offset by grant writing today, and because of those variances, it's hard to put an actual number on it.
Right.
But unless something material and substantial changes within a year, we're gonna be forced to make significant cuts. Or sell the building and move on to somewhere else where we can use those revenues to help sustain us. We have guaranteed revenues coming in from the from cable, but like we've been saying over and over and over, it's diminishing. It's pretty diminishing. I think it's starting to curtail a bit. Right?
Yeah,
It's not
it
diminishing as
actually
quickly
did
as it was.
curtail over the last year.
Yeah, so we might see some leveling off, but
Mhm.
but we want to grow and we can't do that without
Right,
everything else.
so that's what I would say, I would say, I would counter what Brian is saying is that. I think with the curtailing of the funds and understanding what's happening across the nation with cable funding, there's potentially we could. Be level off with what we have currently. But I can guarantee what we have currently is not meeting our community's needs. And is not in any way sustainable. With what we need to be doing as an organization to continue to be relevant. And now we have a commitment to our community in writing. Saying we're gonna be enhancing these services and providing you all these services, and we don't have the bandwidth to do it right now, so. Yes, and the fact that if we don't make a change within the next year, we might as well move on.
Right, and so when I hear that it's gonna take several months to do new bylaws and all the other things, I'm like, you don't have time for all that. Like, we have to move and create the programs now because it takes time, even if we ran the programs right now.
Right.
You still have to fill the seats, you have to advertise the community, you have to get people in the board, you have to have them pay, like, this stuff is all taking too long. Everything is taking too long. And I personally don't have bandwidth to make these things happen. All I can do is tell Tina, go forth and do, right? Just like Rob said, but we're supposed to be helping, but can only do so much, right?
Yeah.
So additional questions? I would say a year before substantial material changes will be required. I would say we have a year.
Rough estimate, what are we looking at for the variance? Like, I know you said it's hard to tell because that number sounds to be fluid, but if you have a rough estimate, what are we looking at financially, like where we are and what we need to make up at this point?
In dollar terms?
Yeah.
I'd have to go back and pull the statements and look them through, but
200,000 to 300,000
yeah,
Just roughly.
it's a couple 100,000.
to be where we should be with a baseline operation.
That's not accounting for expansion efforts, right?
Yeah.
If you want capital poured into expansion, this is to keep us
Yeah.
afloat. It's probably 200,000 to 300,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is scary. It's a scary number for an organization that hasn't been focusing on fund development for many, many years, right?
Mhm.
But I will share, there is some lights and yes, we are leaning heavily on grants right now because they're coming in hand over fist and they're big dollars. But what we're leaning in and have been leaning in and we'll be hearing about hopefully very soon is more operational grants, right? So every grant that's ever been written and provided has all been project-based, capital-based, and the funders are finally seeing that organizations like ours need funds to have people at the facility to provide the services. But it's not a solution. It's a short-term solution for a long-term problem, which I say quite frequently. Our solution needs to be revenue generating. Which is why I'm leaning heavily into the workforce development program. Because I believe that is what's gonna sustain this organization into the future, for long into the future. And I'm working on the business plan. So,
How long until we would be able to see a draft of that?
well, I haven't opened the document yet, so give me, I've had a lot going on, as my report shows you.
Yeah.
Contract signed, condo association is finally under the under control. Roof is on, HVAC's on, I can focus.
Good.
And so my top 3 priorities starting next week are strategic plan, organization restructure, and business plan for the workforce development. In conjunction with the other, so I'm not gonna wait for one or the other. I think that we could get started on the strategic planning process. But it is a good idea to have the bylaws in place before you solidify that.
If there's no reason why we can't start drafting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who is in charge of drafting that document? Is that coming from the board or is that coming from you and then
Are you
we're
talking about
revising?
strategic plan or?
Yes, strategic plan.
Well, as Rob mentioned, it's a good idea for me to give you 10 points, right, of areas. We had talked about coming together at a soon board meeting and just making that our kind of brainstorming planning session.
Mhm.
I'm open to doing that too, so. I think needs to happen sooner rather than
Yeah,
later.
right, so which, I was thinking about something that's. I said dates for December's meeting, but that's also something that we probably should think about for our next November meeting. If everybody wants, should be early November, I think I was looking at November 6th, I believe, I think it was the first Thursday, I
So
think.
before I get too far, do we ever vote on that audit?
Not yet,
approval?
nope, not yet.
No.
We're
Is it still
we're
discussion?
This is discussion.
Okay, I didn't know.
we're still in
Well, we're
discussion
talking about
portion.
meetings,
No,
This is the
so,
discussion on the audit.
oh, okay.
But yeah, so that's something that's gonna come up, so. I can sit around.
Can
and
I make a
email.
motion to approve
We're-
the audits and are we still in
Wait,
discussion?
no, well. Yeah, you can actually make 2 motions right now if you want, so go ahead, what's your first one?
Well, I was gonna make it a motion to approve the audit. What's the other motion that needs? to
Sure.
be-
So on
Start
Eden's,
with that motion.
Okay,
on Eden's motion, to approve the audit report, is there a second
I'll second.
by Brian? We could just do a unanimous, all those in favor, all those opposed, perfect. The ayes have it. Now, the next thing that, so now, we're talking about the strategic plan and that we should call a special meeting. I was looking at sometime in November. And it's gotta be before, obviously, before Thanksgiving. I think it was November 6th, I believe. And I think that was the first Thursday, no, that's a Wednesday, so November 7th. Would be, so that's in 2 weeks from today, to come back and talk about the 10 points of the strategic plan with the board. And that will be that meeting will just be for the purposes of talking about the strategic plan.
If we can do it remotely, I can participate. Otherwise, I'm not gonna have the time.
Might be a good idea to do it that way anyways, just to have the recording.
That's fine. Yeah, absolutely. So
3 weeks.
I'm completely fine with that.
7 p.m.
7.
We'll do it at 7. I don't think I actually need a motion for this at all. And I don't think this has to be, unless everybody disagrees with that, but marking the calendars for November 7th, I guess, actually, this is how I'll say it. Because I am the chair, I reserve the right to call this meeting, so I am calling a special meeting on November 7th at 7 p.m. virtually for the purposes of the discussion of the strategic plan. And we will make this virtual with recording.
Sure.
All right?
Yep.
And I will have a Zoom link sent out to the board, so check your BOD, and I'll make sure that you're included as well.
Thank
too.
you.
So,
I think we could, in that time period, we could try to pull together as much as we can about the governance
Yeah, you and I.
items.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll have that
I
information
I
on
figured
that.
that was all gonna be.
Yeah,
part of that,
yeah.
So, and I think we'll make that meeting, I don't know if we'll do regular meeting hours or if we'll do 1 hour. What does everybody think is
Oh,
the
Strategic planning, you're gonna need 2
2 hours?
And if you wanna start earlier, since we're not commuting here, I'm fine with that. I don't know if other people feel
I actually have a
differently.
conflict at that time, won't be able to make it.
At 7?
Yeah, from 7 to 9, yeah.
Okay, so,
What if we did 6? Could you meet the first
Do
hour?
the first hour, yeah.
all right, so since we're not commuting, why don't we plan from 6 to 8,
Oh, that's good.
okay?
Mhm.
On that time, November 7th.
Can we vote for Adam tonight, or do we have to wait for next meeting?
Does Adam wanna?
Does
wanna
anyone
vote?
wanna join? Yeah, that's the thing.
So what
You wanna skirt him off?
This is an unusual meeting, by the way.
Yeah.
If
yeah,
Rob was
this
here.
is-
I mean, like, I just want to be like, what stuck out to me about what Rob said was the time, the talent, and the treasure. I like at best maybe have a little bit of talent. Like
Don't worry, you'll
so,
be all right.
Well, the
okay,
vote to-
You'll be
because I
fine.
just like want to be real about
You'll
it.
be fine, trust me, you'll be all right.
Like, because I'm like,
You should have seen some of the characters that breezed through here before prior to you, so.
all right, all right. I just like the last thing I was like, I'm
Include myself.
Well,
what do
can you-
mean?
can you
It's like
tell us-
myself.
Can you just explain your
Yeah,
background?
for sure. So,
Yeah.
like, for one thing, like, yes, I'm a real estate agent, but I'm a residential real estate agent. I do not do commercial.
Yep.
I am not going to be an expert in commercial
Mhm.
real estate. It's ridiculous to me that the license applies to both fields because they're
Yeah.
quite different.
Yeah.
You know, so I have experience with a nonprofit. I ran a rehabilitation program for adults with mental illness. I was the director of that program. So it's not just real estate. I think there's some expertise there that I can bring, and certainly can relate to not wanting a board to micromanage my job. For sure, that brings back some memories from years ago. But like, you know, there were many times throughout this meeting where I felt like I was in over my head and like, I'm wondering what can I really bring here? But then again, this is my first, 2 hours of experience here. So, I would love to be a part of it, but like my biggest concern, and there are multiple people, including a certain fiance of mine who would remind me that time is limited, but I'm gonna give it a shot. Like I would love to do that, but I'm certainly not gonna be here with 4,000 insightful comments, in the beginning, but I'm gonna learn and pay attention
You'll
and,
be fine. You'll be-
yeah,
you'll
thank
be-
you.
You'll be fine, and nice to meet you.
Yeah, thanks.
Do you want, all right, so I guess with that being said, do you want to take time to think about it, which might be dangerous, right, if I let you like run out?
I don't think I need time to think about it. I think like I want to, be.
Jump right in?
I want to jump right in, but I want to also like if it's 3 months from now and be like, I'm not sure. If
Oh,
this
no,
is-"
oh, listen, let me tell you something, once you're in, you can't get out. I tell you,
It's like the fight.
we're gonna have to jump you out then if that's gonna be.
This almost seems like a strategic time of the year
Yeah.
to ask the real estate agent to join too, because I'm gonna have a lot more time on November 7th than I am on, say, May 7th.
Right,
Right.
But I would love to be, in all seriousness, I would love to be a part of it. I just want to set proper expectations for, how much
Yeah.
guidance I can provide here.
if you want, we can,
Well, I mean, so it's just one Thursday a month is usually the thing, right? And then if there's special meetings and then subcommittee groups. That's the commitment,
yeah, that's pretty
the
much.
time commitment.
Yeah.
We do ask board, the UMA team does ask board members to try to be present at events that we're hosting or being a part of when they can.
Yeah.
We feel it's important for our community to see our board members engaging in the events that we're participating in, but it's as you can situation, so.
Yeah, and I think like part of the reason why I'm here is that I've been showing up at a lot of them anyways.
Yeah, right?
And I'm passionate about the community, passionate about media, so this is why it feels to make sense.
Well, I'll give you your due, I know we're up against the time, but I'll give you your proper due process here, and are there any questions or comments that anybody would like to ask Adam? Nope.
Can I make a motion to,
You can do whatever you want, Eden.
I don't know, does he go as member? I don't know I guess we need
It's appointed
bylaws.
seat.
Appointed seat. Okay, I make a motion for Adam Schulman to be part of the UMA board as a appointed seat.
Perfect. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by everybody, it sounds.
Third.
like.
Yeah.
I will say seconded by.
We don't wanna sound too
Jonathan,
desperate.
who made the last-
Here, should have done the second in a while.
I seconded Karen for something.
No, we're.
All right, but
Good
you know
Adam.
what, Karen, seconded by Karen,
I will say, you just gotta spell my name right though, no C, SHULMAN.
and that's a unanimous, that's.
No worries.
That's-
That's
No
a
worries.
unanimous vote. All right, so we are, so now we're at a new, the dates for December, we can talk about that in November, so we'll table that.
So is
Oh,
November, is our next meeting that
We have two
special
meetings now.
one? Is it the seventh, even though Brian can't make it, or was it the sixth?
7th.
Okay,
He's gonna be there from 6 to
Okay,
7.
Yeah,
6 to 7.
6 to 7.
6 to 7.
And then we will have our
We will
regular,
continue on after.
yeah, and then we'll have a, thank you, John.
So
Sorry.
we'll try to have stuff emailed out prior to that meeting, so there might be a little homework to read.
Yes, actually, not might be, there will be
Okay.
homework to read.
What else is on the agenda for today?
November
That is-
first is the next regular.
Is our
meeting.
next
That's
regular-
not Thanksgiving, though, right?
Correct, that is not.
So that again, Lori, what date?
November 17th.
Okay.
17.
No, no,
Unless
no,
there's
no, 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 no.
November 21st,
Is our regular.
which is not Thanksgiving.
The third Thursday.
It's the Thursday before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Is your regular meeting.
The day
We need-
after Emmanuel.
We need an executive session for.
Um,
Not at this time.
not at this moment right now, we do not.
One of the things I would mention is that I do think it's a good idea to make executive sessions standard.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah,
yeah, that's
that's
what I
right.
was, yeah, that's what I was
Yeah.
asking them earlier.
I agree. I thought that was a really good.
Yeah,
That is very
yeah,
good.
that's good. All right, at this point now, we are at the end of our agenda, so I, from the chair, cannot make any motions, but I will entertain any motions currently.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, motion by Jonathan, seconded by Lori.
1 year in, you're getting this.
All those, all in favor, we could just do a roll, we could just do a voice
Karen
roll.
is not here. She's.
Karen stepped out, but you
Sure,
still, you still have
unanimous.
quorum.
Yeah, we have quorum now at this point. Perfect. All right, thank you, everybody. See
get
everybody
this done.
November 7th.
It's the best excellence.
I will. That's fine.
Please be on the lookout for some homework.
I have
And
a
then
weird
6
obsession
p.m.
with Pepsi.
Yeah, it's gonna be virtual.
These are the most accurate and